Welcome to Your Next Chapter, the podcast diving into storytelling's impact on innovation. I'm Jeremiah Tittle, CEO of Next Chapter Podcasts, your host for conversations with creative minds reshaping their worlds through narrative. And our guest for this episode is someone I know quite well, Tracy Kaplan. She's the founder of Small But Mighty Media, the creator and executive producer of The 10 News, a news podcast for kids. And Tracy also leads partnerships and operations at the true crime network Tenderfoot TV. During her career at CBS, Twitter, Patreon, she's helped shape the future of media. We're excited to hear her take on media storytelling and where the industry is headed. Welcome, Tracy.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. This has been a long time coming. I was waiting for my invitation.
Yeah, you should have been the first guest, given how formative or how involved you were in the formation of Next Chapter Podcast, which we're going to get into later. But just the brief snapshot is you were the original COO of the company. You helped us, get investment in the door. You helped. You named the company. Small tidbit and impact on what we're doing here. Just a tiny fingerprint on our organization. I'm so pleased to be able to sit down and talk to you for a little bit. You're coming to us from San Francisco, where I guess we worked together many moons ago, and you're the only guest so far in this podcast that I've actually been in that living room. Although I'm looking for your cat, Midnight. I don't see Midnight anymore.
Well, it's sunny today, which for anyone who knows San Francisco, doesn't always happen in June. We refer to it as our lovely June gloom. But it's sunny today. The birds are chirping like crazy outside my window, so you may hear them as special guests during this. And then Midnight, you can't see, is stretched out. She's a black cat, and so she's stretched out, absorbing all of her UV rays on the floor. So yes, usually as soon as I start a Zoom call, she has to be on my lap and make an appearance. But this morning she's decided to just sack out and work on her tan.
Midnight is solar powered, we learned.
Solar powered. Exactly.
Well, let's dive right into it. Our days started at TuneIn together, where it was such a formative experience for me. And, but that's not the beginning of your story. I would love to know, maybe take me through the beginning of your time in media. And it was in Boston, right?
Yeah, well, actually, even going farther back, kind of the seeds of me being like a news junkie started when I was in college. And I interned at the ABC News Bureau in Washington, D.C. Right. And I worked for This Week with Sam Donaldson and Cookie Roberts. And it was, pretty funny because one thing about Sam Donaldson was he was fantastic to the interns. So was Cookie as well. But he would occasionally be like, I'm going to take one of you and you're going to follow me around the White House for the day. So, having that experience of course, he's like 6'2" and I'm 5'2" on a good day. And, people would like laugh when he'd go passing by and then I was scurrying along behind him. But being able to go in the real press room at the White House and just be a part of that, just I think planted a seed for me. And also just an appreciation of what it takes to actually put things together. I think that's something, that brings me such joy, is figuring out how to take what someone who's really creative or really talented and what they're trying to do and put it together. Sam, again, from this formidable experience would ask, oh, do you want to practice a read? And, he'd have the interns practice their on-air skills. And I was like, I don't want to be on air, but I didn't have the heart to tell him, so I would do it. But I've just always loved being the producer behind the scenes. So then fast forward post-graduation, I went up to Boston and worked at GBH, which was WGBH at the time. They've since dropped the W. Oh, yeah. And really got to see, again, just the inner workings of how amazing content got put together. And I had a bunch of different roles there. Most of my time was actually in the fundraising group, working on major gift fundraising. And so helping the producers kind of craft their stories for why a frontline needed funding, or why a Nova series was important, why the kids programming, how impactful that was for the next generation. So it was really just amazing work getting to work with board members and just get a glimpse into the amazing people on both sides, right? The people who have the funds that can make a difference to bring these programs to light. So was there for a while, and then got the itch to go to business school, because it was also, I'm going to age myself here. It was also at that moment where stations like GBH were going through their digital transformation. They were building their digital capabilities. They were expanding from just their linear television channels to and radio to now being able to stream all over the world. And I just did not feel kind of prepared to be thinking about what that was going to do and be a part of leading that. So then I went to business school, moved to New Haven and went to Yale. And then after that, went off to California. So much to the the chagrin of my family and my husband's family, who we, are all East Coasters, and we said to them, like, "Oh, don't worry, this will be 3 to 5 years. We'll get California out of our system, and then we'll come back." And what are we on now? It's now been 15 years, a house, and 2 kids later. Sorry, East Coast, we're not coming back. We like to visit, but
Yeah.
we're staying put.
So, as someone who oversaw CBS's relationship with YouTube in the late aughts, I wonder how aware traditional media outlets were of the disruption the internet was about to cause to their business model. I'm curious, what caused companies or teams to succeed during this time period? What was your experience?
It was a crazy time. And I was really fortunate to, come out to the Bay Area and join CBS Interactive at a time where the digital group was kind of working like a startup within a big company.
Hmm.
So, having kind of obviously the backing of amazing CBS content, but then working on a team that was really approaching this as if we were, a startup, scrappy, having to figure things out, move quickly, try things out and see what would happen. So we were at CBS, we were the first partner to have CBS ads run in the YouTube video player. And
Wow.
I know for people who are not in the industry, it's like, why is that a big deal? It was a really big deal. And, it was something that had been kind of discussed between the two companies for a long time. And then when we got the green light to do it, we had to move really quickly, and just worked so collaboratively with the YouTube engineering team and the CBS engineering team. And it was exhausting and fun all at the same time. I'm sorry to all of the YouTube watchers out there who then, like, all of a sudden had in-stream ads playing on their Letterman videos. That was my fault. But it really pushed forward a whole new kind of era, especially within, the companies, of seeing like, wow, this is something real that, up to that point, everyone was kind of struggling with monetization, struggling with this feeling that um, their efforts kind of off platform were kind of divorced from what they were doing as a whole. And kind of our mantra on the CBS team was publish once, distribute everywhere, monetize everywhere. And so when that happened, it really kind of woke some people up to how big the opportunity was, because I think up to that point there really was this feeling of like, we have to bring everybody back, like everyone has to come back to the mothership, like viewers have to come back to cbs.com. And this was now a realization of, it actually benefits us to meet viewers where they are. And I've really taken that to heart then with anything I've worked on, is really thinking about what are the different audience dynamics on each platform, and what does your content look like? How do you operationalize it so that you're not kind of overtaxing yourself and you're figuring out how to reuse content, but you're also really thinking about what is the right content for this audience where they are.
You keep answering the follow-up question that I have. But I appreciate that. No, I mean, it's more a testament to your ability to see the future, which I believe for a while. So if this, podcasting or media career doesn't work out, you could always be a fortune teller. But I wanted to ask you about when
Get some tarot
podcasting.
cards.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm good with that.
When did podcasting first hit your radar? Did you, like me, kind
Mhm.
of thumb your nose at it for a while, and then was there some moment that you were like, "Oh, this is a serious business that I should take seriously myself"?
No, actually, because I was kind of raised in a NPR radio household, I was already a big fan of just the medium as a whole, and kind of I hadn't really thought through the opportunities, but I was very into the content already, like listening to This American Life and things like that. So when I joined TuneIn, that was kind of my move from the video space, which after CBS, I had gone to a video startup that then was acquired by Twitter, and I was there for a few years. And then my move to TuneIn was purposeful because I was just it was a space that one I enjoyed myself, but I always kind of look at like what don't I know, and I look for opportunities to fill that, and it's scary, right? It's a lot easier to be like, I know how to do this, I'm going to go do this, and I'm a weird a weird duck where I'm like, I don't know how to do this, let me see if I can find some place that I can convince to hire me, and I'll figure it out. And so that was kind of my approach going into TuneIn was, I went into a really fun role of working on content partnerships. That part I knew really well. I'd been working with partners for years. I love working with partners, and coming up with great strategies to grow partnerships. But the pieces that I felt like I didn't know well were mobile and audio. So that it was very purposeful for me to seek that out, to build up my knowledge there. So that's where I jumped in, and I have to say, it's amazing now. That was 2017, I believe, 2016, 2017, and people that I still work with now are relationships that I made then. And that's been
Yeah.
really fun and just really great to see not only the podcast industry grow overall and new people come in, but just this like appreciation and support, for those of us who have now been in it for a little bit.
Yeah, no, I love that. I mean, it's interesting when you have a company like TuneIn. Don't want to belabor it, but it was a startup that had been backed by the biggest venture capitalists in Silicon Valley and had been around for 15 or whatever number of years prior to me joining. But some of those relationships, even if there was a constant pivot going on, some of those relationships have lasted so long. There's Chris Peterson, who ended up being the first head of podcasts at iHeart, and now one of my good buddies in the industry. And I ran into Yana and Albert from business development now at Apple, in New York this past December. So it's those types of relationships that, when you're in the thick of things, in the trenches, as it were, it's really still special to me. And I learned a ton there.
Donald Albright, the co-founder of Tenderfoot, who I work for now. I mean, we met then, and we were coming up with crazy plans for how to promote the Tenderfoot content, and coming up with new programs for how to distribute and monetize podcasts. And so it's fun to kind of have that base of a relationship, and then come back to it years later and then be working together again, and just know that, okay, we've we know each other well of like what we want to try out, what we're doing, but also like have the history of seeing how the industry has grown and what works and what doesn't work and where to keep kind of pushing forward.
Yeah, I didn't know anything about Max Cutler and Parcast until what
Mhm.
was the name of the program we had that you ran the first?
First listen, yeah. Yeah, and so that was the idea of, building the technology so that, and putting podcasts behind a paywall, and again, this was 2017, so doing this pretty early, doing, an exclusive windowing, program where they would be behind the TuneIn paywall before they went out to Apple or other platforms, and then for the partners and also internally at TuneIn, we had the technology to track when somebody signed up for the subscription service, we could tell what was the first thing that they listened to. So basically making that correlation that that's what they came in for. And so let's say it was a podcast show, we could report back and say, this many signups happened because of your show. And while that's pretty commonplace in ad tracking, right? Knowing like, oh, this many conversions happened. It's really not there in podcasting even today. Like it's still that part of kind of knowing why someone signed up for a subscription service. Like some of the platforms have it, but because of privacy, choose not to share it. I'm a believer in like share it because it helps us all learn. You don't have to share someone's IP or private details, but you can share it in the aggregate. And I've been working with partners like Apple to try to get that information, and move kind of that part along, because obviously like it helps to know like why is a listener choosing to pay, and then how do you create more content that keeps that listener feeling like they're getting value for what they're paying for.
That's a really good point. And I think that black box the glass box, I think is part of their kind of value proposition is like we're adding more transparency to an
Yeah.
industry that has lacked that from its inception. Like it's become, you know, it's developed over time, which is
Right.
it's really interesting. I want to hear about your time at Patreon and how that came together,
Mm.
because that was a continuation of your good kind of partnership building and developing, with these creators. What was that experience like? How did it come together for you?
Yeah. So, I mean, at the end of the day, a through line is I like to make money for creators. So,
Love that.
today, and Apple's been a great partner in this. I run Tenderfoot subscription service on Apple. And when I was kind of looking for what was next after TuneIn, I again, I hadn't been working with individual creators. So that was again a piece that I felt like I had started to do a little bit at TuneIn and I wanted to go more into, of really moving out of the ad supported world, and get into what does it mean to, fund a creator directly. So that's what really attracted me to Patreon. Um, Ultimately it just for kind of where I wanted to go next in my career and become a creator myself. I wasn't there for that long, but in my time there I was really able to just again meet wonderful creatives and also really get some insight, which I feel myself now as a creator of a podcast, really get some insight into the internal feelings about building a membership and getting direct funding from people. And a lot of what a lot of people don't realize is it becomes very emotional for a creator, because
Mm.
they now are feeling like, wow, I have to produce content because people are giving me money for this content. Whereas, like, if you're producing something and it's being sold and an advertiser's running on it, you're so far removed from that revenue transaction. And here it's very personal. And so that was something that I found very challenging, but also interesting, of getting that exposure to how do you help creators where they're balancing the emotional piece of feeling like they have to stay on a hamster wheel and constantly produce
Mm.
content, and really understanding how much of an emotional component is there, and being able to work with creators and help them balance when they need to take a break, understanding it's okay to take a break, and how to message that to their audience so that their audience doesn't go away. And at the end of the day, it's a value transaction. So if you are providing enough value for people who are signed up for your membership or signed up for your fan club, they're going to understand like you need to recharge, right? They want you at your best creative self.
No, that's some key insights there. I think before we get to the 10 news, which I'm excited to talk about, I wanted to ask you, you know, a little bit more maybe insight about podcasting in general and where you think it's going. You know, what stories work best as a podcast in your opinion?
From what I've seen, um, it's really about creating an experience. So, and I think, at different times of the day, we're all different people, right? Like
Mm.
what I want in the morning on, a morning walk is going to be very different than what I'm looking for on a 3-hour drive. And so I do think there is space in the market for all types. Like you'll never hear me say, you know, oh, like people have enough talk shows, or people have enough drama or true crime, whatever it is. I feel like there is room for all of it. I mean, if you look at my playlist, it is a complete hodgepodge of things because at different times I want to listen to different things. But at
Sure.
the end of the day, it's all about, are you creating an experience in that moment, and are you creating a connection to the listener? So, if you are doing more of a chat talk show, like, are you sharing enough of yourself that people feel like they're interested in the topic, and they're getting what they came for? If it's a limited series, are you really giving it the full force of like amazing music, amazing sound design? If someone's only coming for 6 episodes, are they getting what they want out of it? And I think that, as I'm rambling a little bit here, I'll accept that. The key is, are you giving the listener what they expect? Because the worst thing
Mm.
is kind of marketing that they're coming in for something, and then they listen to the first 10 minutes and they're like, this isn't what I thought I was coming for. I'm out of here. Really making sure you're giving them what they came for.
Ah, that makes a ton of sense. I love the way you put that. I'm curious about true crime. Working at Tenderfoot, I've never made a true crime podcast, but there is this, I've read a lot or heard talkers, panels, whatever, discuss why women love true crime so much. What's your take on
Mhm.
that?
It's interesting because I had not been a big true crime listener watcher. I've always said I like my true crime fake. I'm a huge a huge watcher of like NCIS and Criminal Minds. Like I like the wrapping things up in 45 minutes. I do think
You like the fiction?
there's yeah, I go for the fiction. But our listenership is really invested in these stories, and I think that's it. I think it's like, the stories, and like really understanding like who the victims are, and maybe in some cases seeing themselves, and using it as kind of a like, what not to do situation. I really don't
Yeah.
have a good answer. One of the things that I really appreciate at Tenderfoot is the amount of tension that's given to the victims and the stories, and
Mm.
the partnering with organizations, and really making sure that the stories that are put out are done in a thoughtful way. One of the shows that came out last year, Freeway Phantom, it's this really, really well done series about 6 Black girls that went missing, that were murdered
Mm.
in the 70s. And it's an unsolved case. It delves into this amazing detective, female detective, who just hasn't been able to let the case go her entire life. I mean, she's well retired, and still thinking about it. And, just stories like that that you don't see on primetime news or covered on a lot of the streaming services. Like, podcasting definitely allows for some of these stories that need to be talked about, to have a pathway to be talked about. So I think that's one of the things that I really appreciate, and I think is what drives, listenership, is just that, like, that care and attention comes through.
I love that. And I love how you addressed how, maybe one of the reasons podcasting has become so popular. I mean, I have a number of reasons because I'm on pitch calls all the time for why podcasts are great. But I think you identified something I don't really bring up in these situations, is there are gaps in what
Mhm.
we've been fed to us via TV, linear streaming, of television, whether it's fiction, nonfiction, or otherwise, that whether that has to do with marginalized communities, not, getting short shrift and being demonized, all the evidence from whether it's the war on drugs or what have you. But just the amount of people of color being on, whether it's Cops, the TV series, so popular over decades, like, and so what podcasting, allows folks to have a voice who haven't had it, or have really, been buried in terms of the ability for people to have access to these types of stories. So that's really powerful what you just said. I hadn't thought about it like that. So I appreciate you offering that.
There are great programs on Netflix and Amazon and things like that, but, it is very difficult then, right, to do an update. There's not gonna be a bonus episode on, updates in the case, or, if something has changed. Podcasting allows you the freedom to do that. It's, a great medium for, not having things just be kind of talked about and then put on a shelf. You can kinda come back to it. Our current one of the Tenderfoot current podcast, called Status Untraced, just released a bonus episode of a roundtable of the host and producer, kind of talking about what they think now, since they've done all the episodes and the production's out. And I think that's really interesting, because you also then kind of have the perspective of how something's been received, questions that have come in from listeners that you can then respond to. So in that way, I love podcasting for that kind of, like, continuation of the story, and
Mm.
keeping that connection between the listener and the host.
So even though I have a good sense of the answer to this question, I have to ask, what inspired you to create the 10 News?
I was home for the first time in my career. So I started doing some consulting work, and in all of my jobs, I've traveled a lot. And my kids have been troopers of being, the last kids at daycare pickup, and or aftercare pickup. And for the first time, I was doing, the 3 o'clock after school, picking them up and listening to NPR in the car. And then as soon as I would be, at the pickup line to get them, I would have to switch off, because just the topics were not really age appropriate for them to hear. But they were important topics. They were, there was this rumbling of a virus happening. We were in the midst of the Democratic primaries for who was going to run against Trump. And then, about a month later, so this was going on, and I kind of had my habit of, like, drive up, change the radio station. And about a month later, um I was talking to my kids, and I said, I'm curious, like, do you know who's running against, who's running for the Democratic primary? And without missing a beat, they both went, Mike will get it done. And I was like, what? And I realized that they knew Mike Bloomberg's campaign slogan, and not because of content that they were watching on YouTube, because of ads they were seeing on YouTube. And again, going back to my YouTube CBS days, like, as a parent, I had been paying attention to what content they were watching. I was not paying attention to the ads that they were seeing. And so it really dawned on me that this was where they were kind of learning a lot of what was going on in politics. So I kind of started looking around, and again, being having been in podcasting, I was listening to a lot of podcasts in the car with the kids. They loved Wow in the World, but they had started to age out of it. And so we were listening to things like Bay Curious, which is a fantastic podcast out here done by the KQED team. And I realized that their capacity for more information, for a more adult conversation was really there. They were 8 and 10 at the time. And so I started noodling on this idea of a podcast for them that we could listen to together, that would help break down some of the concepts, kind of give the context behind, if they saw like a headline pop up on my phone, really go that level deeper. And again, this was right before COVID hit. I went to the Hot Pot Summit in New York, and I talked to, some of the most amazing leaders in podcasting and said, what do you think about this idea? And why isn't anybody else doing this? And the response I got was, there's definitely a gap for kind of the 8 to 12-year-old set in the market. There's definitely a gap in news and current events, and no one's doing it because it's really hard. It's impossible. Like, how are you going to break down these concepts? Obviously there's a need. Don't do it. And so I came home and I was like, there's a need and it's hard. Now I have to do this. So I got to work, and then the world shut down.
Mm,
And it just became even more clear to me that this needed to be out there. So
yeah.
um again, one of the things that I love doing is putting together really great teams and seeing what happens. So I reached out to you because I was still doing some consulting for you, and actually I told you about this idea, and then I put it on the shelf, right? Because I got so busy with next chapter stuff. And then I think you said to me, well, why aren't we doing your idea? And you gave me a great kind of kick in the butt, and got reached out to the Rococo Punch team, who were the amazing team behind Circle Round originally, and got a pilot going. We brought on Bethany Van Delft as the host, and put some great writers and producers, and we kind of made it happen. And I think the other thing that we did that I'm very proud of was that we really wanted to make sure we could even do the operational side of putting out a podcast like this. And so, if you remember, we piloted it for 6 weeks, and
Oh
those
yeah.
episodes never saw the light of day. I used them to send them out to get feedback, from people and kids and adults on if we were heading in the right direction. But really, that was just to see, can we work at the pace and have the quality and do kind of all the checks that we need to do of like, are we not being condescending? Are we getting our facts
Mm,
right? Being able to kind of do all that operational and really important work before we were ready to shop it around and go live.
that's great. What's unique about podcasting for kids?
I think unique and really hard is that you're being discovered in two ways. One, by kids finding it themselves, but two, by adults introducing it to their kids. And in that case, you get one shot, right? If I say to my kids, who by the way now are 12 and 14, so very tough customers, if I say to them, hey, let's listen to this, and they don't like it, then the next time I say, hey, listen to this, they're not going to say yes. So to me, that's the most challenging thing, is you really just have that one shot, and it's got to be great.
You already answered the other part, which is on the advertising side. Bloomberg ads on your YouTube videos. We don't want that on a kids podcast. That's for sure.
Right, right. It's a challenge, and I think this is where I honestly get very frustrated, because I think the ad market is a little slow to realize just how much growth potential there is in kids and family, kids and family listening. It's growing by leaps and bounds every year. And I would love to see more advertisers come in because there's amazing content creators out there who are trying to create content on shoestring budgets. I'll put myself in that camp as well for the 10 news. And we want to have great quality programs, and we need funding. We need ad revenue, and kids don't mind sitting through ads that are targeted to their grown-ups if they're funny, if they're done well. They'll see them on Nickelodeon, they see them on TV. It's okay to advertise on kids and family podcasts.
The 10 News wrapped up season 4, looking ahead to a season 5 in the fall, which is exciting. And it's no stretch to say, I mean, you're the reason for that. I know you created it, you're the EP, but the cast of characters might have shifted here and there in terms of what the team looks like, but I mean, you're the driving force for it, so you deserve all the credit, honestly.
I love our co-hosts, Pamela Kirkland and Ryan Willard, and just like the willingness to push when we need to push. I mean, the thing that is so amazing. So in the show, for people who aren't familiar with it, we cover everything from like International Lego Day to the Ukraine war, and there's no topic that we shy away from. We also have a lot of fun. Like the newsroom is a world. Our finale, we had a kid take over, and the kids sent Ryan down a slide through a trap door so that they could take over the studio. I mean, we really create some fun around facts and information. And what is amazing to me, and what I love so much about the team, is when something happens, good or bad, but when something happens in the world, that I don't have to be the one to say to the team, we got to do something on it. Like, I get the slacks from Ryan, from Pam, that says like, okay, how are we covering this? And to me, that just means the world to me, of just having team members. And a shout out to Carson, who writes all of our social posts and metadata, and keeps us on track with the newsletters. So we just have this amazing team that is so invested in what we're doing, that it's just a pleasure. I'm happy to wrap up the season because I need that kind of creative break, but I'm also sad. I'm also like, oh, something just happened, I want to do an episode on that.
Yeah. And it's an election year, and when you're in the news, there's no avoiding it. A lot of people, I think society, it's a mix. People are addicted to it. People are needing to turn it off because it's overwhelming. So you approach this with kids. I mean, it's a whole different animal, isn't it?
It's challenging. And so, kind of two approaches that I'm taking for this year is, one, I've been working on a little secret project around animal news, because going back to my GBH days, during kind of one of the most awful moments in US history, when 9/11 happened, the leadership, I can't shout out the leadership at GBH enough. They made the decision to take one of our channels and make it 24/7 kids programming, so that parents who were kind of processing, what was happening and wanting to stay focused on the news, had a safe place that they could put their kids in front of, and know
Mm.
that they could choose how much or how little kids were exposed to. We live in a really different world now, right? I saw a post about a mother who went to a restaurant and didn't realize that they'd have CNN playing on the TVs there, and
Mm.
the woman's 11-year-old was seeing stuff that she wasn't ready to talk to them about. So we just live in such a different world of onslaught of information and news, and I think about that a lot. So one of the projects I'm working on is bringing a animal news show. So if it's a week where we're covering something pretty heavy, there's another option. if you still love news, you can get your news fix, just it's going to be fun and furry. So, having that other option. And then with the 10 news, really focusing on kind of some of the skills that kids want and need. So how to know if something is fake news, how to really think about sourcing something, not jumping to conclusions. I think this is something that we talk so much about during the height of COVID, is that people were very quick to blame scientists for, well, you said this last month, why are you saying this? Science is messy. Like,
Hmm.
learning why something's happening and what the outcome is going to be, that takes time. And in a news environment, the one thing we've lost is patience. We want to know everything now.
Yeah.
We want all the information now. So one of the approaches that we really take at the 10 is being honest when we don't have all of the information, or
Hmm.
saying, like, we're still
Novel.
learning about this story, and we're processing it, and this is what we can tell you now. We don't have all the answers, but here are the questions that we are asking, and here's the definition of a term that you might be hearing, so at least you kind of understand what's being talked about, and can have a good conversation with your grown up, because now you understand, like, what NATO stands for and why it's important that the Ukraine wants to join NATO, just like things like that, where trying to find those pieces of control that you can have in a very chaotic environment.
This is fantastic. I'm so glad we talked. You got to went on a deeper dive about the 10 news. It's exciting for me. I feel like we really want to have a positive impact, and however we can do that. But I think what you just honed in on is the importance of authenticity in podcasting. It's not a debatable or negotiable topic. It's so essential to be, as you said earlier, kind of fulfill the promise you've made to your listeners. But going beyond that, what news outlet has said we don't have all the answers? I
Right.
feel like that is such a rare. It doesn't happen. I don't think. Developing situation, maybe yes, but I think, like, wanting to put this confident, authority ethos out there, whereas, like, the idea that you might not have all the information and actually admit that, that's the kind of thing I really applaud in podcasting. So kudos to you. We've kind of glossed over it a couple of times, but you were the original COO of the company. The name of the company came from you. You coined that. You deserve credit for Next Chapter being the name of our company, Next Chapter Media, Next Chapter Podcast, and are just so formative, helpful in those formative years of launching our Shakespeare series, working with Michael Goodfriend, and getting us all set up, and now this podcast is called Your Next Chapter as well. So we've continued to double down on that. So I just have to just extend my deep level of gratitude to you for all that you've done to help us. It was really special for me when we were at the Ambies, which for the non podcast industry initiated as kind of like our Oscars in LA in March, and we gave each other a high five because projects we worked on
Hmm.
each one Ambies, and so that was really special for me. And another point on that front is beef with Bridget Todd. I didn't know who Bridget Todd was until you brought her on to the 10 News as a correspondent. And she's just a rock star. I mean,
She
I'd
is
say
a rock
beyond
star. Also,
podcasting.
also the host of uh There Are No Girls on the Internet. She's that
Absolutely.
iHeart podcast. She's amazing. And so, yeah, I mean, that's where I think one of the greatest joys in my life has just been connecting people, and kind of making introductions and seeing where it goes, and helping people make the most out of what they want to do. So, and it was mutually beneficial, because obviously, I was when I was working for you at Next Chapter, I was in the middle of a big home project, and it was nice to be able to still be working and feel like I was, using that part of my brain.
I could never thank you enough. And I think the last question we ask everyone, I'm going to ask you as well,
Mhm.
is what's next for your career? What's your next chapter? We ask everyone this question.
I affectionately referred to, my launching of Small But Mighty Media, which is, my company with the 10 News, and through which I do, my contract work. You know, I I had referred to that as my midlife crisis. Um, mostly because I never thought I'd be a creator. I never,
Mm.
I am just in awe of, so many talented people out there. I always saw myself again as like behind the scenes, I'll put things together. And, I think just my definition has shifted of how to define creator. And I think, what I really want to do next is get out of my living room. You're seeing it in all its glory here. This is where the magic happens every day. This isn't just for the podcast. This is where I work every day, and work remotely. And I think, I've definitely fallen into being a little too comfortable at home. And so, and really missing a lot of that personal connection that I used to have. So when I'm thinking about my next chapter, it's getting out there more, connecting with more people in the industry, and just having some fun.
Oh, Tracy, such a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I mean, you could have been our first guest. It was overdue, but we have a little break here in the summer, and getting ready, gearing up for season 5 of the 10 News. I know it's going to be a big one, so I'm excited to work on that.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, and I'm just so excited, proud, for everything that you've built at Next Chapter, and just looking forward to doing more together.
Yes, Tracy. Thank you for listening to this episode of Your Next Chapter. I'm your host, JT, Jeremiah Tittle. Our executive producer is Nick Kastner, and it is edited by Justin Cortese. We drop episodes bi-weekly. Please follow the show and leave a 5-star review. Thanks for listening.